The wind never stopped. It was the first and last truth of the Llano Estacado, this high, flat ocean of grass. It scoured the land, dried the air until it cracked the skin, and carried the grit of 1,000 miles. Here, on the raw edge of the high plains in the 1870s, the sky was an enormous, aching blue. Nights fell fast, bringing a chill that sank into the bone, even after the hottest days. The half-moon relay station was not a town. It was a scar of sod and rough-hewn timber, a necessary pause on the new stagecoach line that bled westward. It consisted of a main house, a solid corral, and a barn that leaned with the prevailing wind. It was a place of transit. Migrants with hollow eyes pushed past, chasing the sun. Buffalo hunters, smelling of iron and viscera, stopped to trade hides. Traders guided mules heavy with goods, sometimes a patrol of cavalry. Their blue uniforms powdered in alkali dust, would water their mounts, their faces remote, eyes fixed on the distant forts that were lonely islands in the grass. Eliza Hart stood by the corral, her hand resting on the warm neck of her buckskin mare. She was a woman in her early 20s, but the sun and the wind had already etched fine lines around her eyes. She had grown up with horses, learned their language of muscle and breath before she learned the niceties of parlor conversation. She knew how to set a broken leg, how to find water, how to shoot straight, and how to be quiet. These were the skills that mattered. She had come to this place, this hard, high country, for one reason: her younger brother, Jesse. He was lost out here, swallowed by the prairie, and she would find him. She held the reins in her left hand. The leather was dark, supple, braided in a complex pattern only she knew. She had made them herself, a physical act of will, a way to hold on to a life that constantly threatened to fly apart. She watched the horizon, the endless line where the pale grass met the blue. She was not waiting for the stagecoach. She was waiting for a sign, miles away, hidden by a fold in the earth. Tahan watched the station. He was a Numunu, a Commanche. He lay flat on the rise, the dry grass tickling his cheek, his presence less than a whisper. He was a scout, his eyes trained to see the flaw in the pattern, the single blade of grass bent the wrong way. He was not alone. He traveled with a small group of elders and other scouts. They were not here for war. They were here to talk, to negotiate with the white men in the distant town. Their purpose was singular: to protect Murakay, the canyon. It was a sacred place, a cleft in the flat land where the water ran underground, surfacing in cool, clear pools even in the driest seasons. It was the lifeblood of his people when the rest of the world turned to dust. On the canyon walls, the old ones had left their handprints, a gallery of ancestors touching the stone. Tahan watched the activity at the half-moon, the clatter of wagons, the shouting men. It was a noise that did not belong, a disturbance. He saw the woman, Eliza. He noted the way she stood with her horse, easy and familiar. She was not afraid of the animal. She understood it. He respected that. He respected the horse, and he respected the land, the people, these new people. He was wary of. They came like locusts, consuming and moving on, never understanding the earth they walked upon. His people were cautious of all settlers. The air at the station was thick with smells, the sharp tang of wood smoke from the cook fire, the rich, oily scent of horse leather and sweat, the faint, sour smell of the alkali dust. Life here was not measured in hours, but by the slow crawl of the sun. It was measured in the distance to the next water, in the rare, precious promise of a rain cloud. Eliza gave her mare a final pat and walked toward the sod house. Mrs. Bell, the station owner, was beating a rug over a line, her face flushed. She was a wide, tough woman who had buried 2 husbands on this prairie. Eliza waited until the woman paused for breath. She asked her quiet question. Had any word come through? Any rider seen a young man, tall, with light hair, riding a bay gelding with one white sock? Mrs. Bell stopped, her hands on her hips. She shook her head. She told Eliza it was a big country, too big, It swallowed people. She warned her about lone riders, about the hard winter coming. Eliza nodded, her face betraying nothing. She had heard the warnings. They did not matter. Jessie was here. She knew it. A new group of riders approached, not from the east or west stage roads, but from the north. They were not migrants. They were not soldiers. They were a dozen men, riding hard. Their gear new and expensive. They carried repeating rifles in their saddle scabbards. They moved with a swagger that was different from the weary caution of the migrants or the stiff discipline of the cavalry. Their leader was a big man with a thick beard and eyes the color of faded denim. He dismounted, his spurs jingling, and entered the station house without a word to Mrs. Bell. His name, though Eliza did not know it yet, was Caleb Rourke. His men fanned out, checking their horses, their gazes sweeping the station with a look of assessment, of ownership. Eliza moved away, busying herself with her saddlebags. She listened. The men spoke loudly. They were not settlers. They were hired. She heard the words, survey, water, grade. Then she heard the name, the Red Mesa and Pacific. A railroad, a private line, pushing through territory the government had not even fully mapped. The rumor she had heard back in Dodge was true. They were here. Tahan saw them too. He and his companions watched the arrival of Rourke and his men. The air on the rise grew colder. These were not simple travelers. These were the men who drove stakes into the earth, the men who preceded the Iron Snake. Tahan knew what this meant. A railroad needed water. The flattest, easiest grade for a railroad through this sector ran directly toward Murakay. They would seek to possess the sacred canyon. They would try to steal the underground stream, the life of the people. The handprints on the ancestor rock would be blasted away to make way for a bridge. He looked at the station, a place he despised. He saw the armed men led by Rourke, and he saw the woman, Eliza, who now stood apart, watching the new arrivals with a stillness that matched his own. She was white. She was a settler. But in her eyes, he recognized something of the land itself, watchful, wary, and unwilling to be broken. Eliza felt the shift. The air, already thin, now seemed tight, vibrating with a new tension. These men, this railroad, they were a shadow falling over the land. She did not know how, but she knew this was connected to Jessie. He was a surveyor. He would have known about this. She pulled a folded paper from her shirt. It was a map, drawn by hand. It was the last letter she had received from Jessie. It was not a map of towns or forts. It was a map of water, creeks, springs, and a canyon marked with a double line, noted as permanent water, Murakay. She looked at the leather reins in her hand, the intricate braid. Her life was her own. She would find her brother. She would find out what this railroad wanted with that hidden water. The wind blew cold, and for the first time, it felt like a warning. The stagecoach was an oven, thick with the smell of stale whiskey, unwashed bodies, and the fine alkali dust that seeped through every seam. Eliza Hart sat wedged between a portly drummer selling patent medicines and a rail-thin preacher clutching a worn Bible. Outside, the Llano Estacado was a blur of bleached grass under a white-hot sky. She had left Half Moon Station against her better judgment. Caleb Rourke and his railroad men had remained, their presence a heavy, metallic weight on the air. But she could not wait. She had to find the next telegraph office, had to send another query about Jessie. The coach wheels screamed over the dry ruts, the rhythm jarring her teeth. She kept her hand on the small satchel in her lap, though the real map, Jessie's map of the water, was folded stiffly and hidden deep within her bodice, a secret against her skin. They entered the winding, eroded cut of cottonwood draw. The air grew still. The walls of the dry wash rose on either side, baked clay and scrubbed cedar. The sound of the horse's hooves and the rattling harness seemed unnaturally loud. The first shot was a sharp crack that echoed, indistinguishable from a breaking axle, until the preacher beside her gasped and slumped forward, a dark flower blooming on his gray shirt. Chaos erupted. The drummer screamed. The driver shouted. A curse cut short by another shot. The coach lurched violently, tilted, and crashed onto its side with a groan of splitting timber. Eliza was thrown against the roof, her head striking the frame. Dust and splintered wood filled the air. She heard men shouting outside, the panicked neighing of the horses. The coach door was torn open. A man squinted into the gloom, his face masked by a dirty bandana. He ignored the dying preacher, ignored the whimpering drummer. His eyes found Eliza. "The bag," he snarled, reaching for her satchel. "Give me the map." Eliza clung to it, her mind reeling. How did he know? He lunged, grabbing the leather strap. Eliza kicked out, her boot connecting with his chest. But he was strong. He dragged her halfway out of the wreckage. Then a new sound entered the fight. It was not a gunshot. It was a low, heavy thwack, and the man holding her stiffened. He looked down, his eyes wide with surprise, at the feathered shaft protruding from his throat. He clawed at it, made a wet, gasping sound, and fell backward. Another man shouted a warning, but it was too late. From the rocks above the draw, two figures descended. They moved not like men, but like shadows detaching themselves from the earth. Tahan and his companion, Nokoni, swept into the melee. They were armed with bows and lances, and they used them with a devastating silent efficiency. The attackers, armed with rifles and revolvers, were thrown into confusion. They had been prepared for a stagecoach, not for Commanche warriors. The fight was short and brutal. Tahan moved with a fluid grace, his knife flashing as he cut a rider from his saddle. Nokoni, broader and heavier, used a war club to break the arm of a man aiming a rifle. The remaining attackers, seeing their leader fall, panicked. They spurred their horses, scrambling back up the draw, firing wildly over their shoulders. Tahan and Nokoni did not give chase. They stood breathing heavily in the sudden, ringing silence, broken only by the groans of the wounded driver and the crying of the drummer inside the coach. Eliza crawled from the wreckage, her body aching. She looked at the man who had grabbed her. He was dead. She felt a wave of nausea, but pushed it down. She looked at Tahan. He was not looking at her. He was already kneeling by the man he had killed with the arrow, the one who had demanded the map. He was practical, searching the body, his companion. Nokoni was moving toward the front of the coach to check on the driver and the horses. Eliza, her legs shaking, did the same. She approached the body of a second attacker, one shot by his own comrades in the panic. He lay face down in the dust. A brass badge was pinned to the inside of his canvas vest, glinting in the sun. She knelt and touched it. It was a disc, stamped with the image of a red mesa and a crossed pick and hammer. The red mesa and Pacific. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was not a random robbery. This was Rourke. Tahan rose from the other body. He held a folded sheaf of papers. He looked at the legal seals, the dense script he could not read, and then at Eliza. He held the papers out to her. Her hands trembled as she took them. It was a legal order, or it pretended to be. It was a writ of seizure for all lands designated within the Murakay sector, citing railroad development and eminent domain. It was signed by a county judge. Eliza knew the name, Judge Harlan. But Harlan's district was 200 miles south of here. This was a fraud, a clumsy, arrogant forgery. They knew, she whispered, looking at Tahan. Her mind raced. How did they know she had the map? She had been so careful. She had told no one. Wait. She had written a letter at the last town, asking if any mail had arrived for her or Jessie at the Half Moon Station. Had she mentioned the map? Had she told Mrs. Bell she was carrying something important from Jessie, the station owner? The woman was kind, but she was also a gossip, and she seemed friendly with Rourke's men. A cold dread settled in Eliza's stomach. Someone had talked. Tahan watched her face. His expression was impossible to read. carved from the same hard earth as the canyon walls. "You carry the water map," he stated. It was not a question. Eliza flinched, her hand instinctively going to her chest. "They want Murakay," Tahan said. His English was slow, measured, each word chosen with care. "My people need that water. The Iron Road will kill it." Eliza looked at the dead men, at the ruined coach. The preacher was silent now. The drummer had stopped crying and was just making small, hiccuping sounds. "I have to get to town," she said, her voice thin. "The driver—" "Nokoni sees to him," Tahan said. "Town is not safe. They are there. The station is not safe. They are there." He looked at her, a direct, assessing gaze. "You will come back to Half Moon. We will take you. In return, you will tell me everything you know about these railroad men." It was not a request. It was a statement of fact, a trade, her safety for her information. She looked at the two Commanche men. She had been raised on stories of their cruelty, of the raids, the fear. But these men had just saved her life. The men who looked like her, the white men from the railroad, had just tried to kill her for a piece of paper. She nodded. "I will." The return to Half Moon Station was a grim affair. Nokoni, who had a gentle hand, had bandaged the driver's shoulder and splinted the preacher's leg. The man was not dead, just badly wounded. They righted the coach, rounded up the spooked team, and limped back across the prairie. Tahan and Nokoni riding as silent escorts. When they pulled into the station yard, Mrs. Bell rushed out, her apron flapping, her face ruddy with work, went pale when she saw the wounded, then hardened when her eyes landed on Tahan and Nokoni. She hurried Eliza toward the sod house. "Dear child, you are hurt," she fussed, brushing dust from Eliza's shoulders. Then she lowered her voice to a harsh, urgent whisper. "What are you doing with them? Are you mad? You cannot trust those Commanche. They are savages. They would as soon kill you as look at you." Tahan was 10 feet away, dismounting, his back to them. But Eliza saw the muscles in his shoulders tighten. He had heard every word. He turned his head slowly, his dark eyes meeting Eliza's over Mrs. Bell's shoulder. It was a silent, heavy question. Eliza felt a sudden, sharp anger. She pulled her arm from Mrs. Bell's grasp. "They saved my life. Mrs. Bell," she said, her voice clear and cold. "The men who attacked us were from the railroad." "Mrs. Bell's jaw dropped. Eliza walked away from her, toward the corral where the attackers' horses had been tied. She needed a moment. She needed to think. She leaned against the rough cedar rails, checking her own mare, her hands tracing the familiar braid of the reins. Her gaze drifted over the other animals. They were a motley collection, branded with a dozen different marks. Then she saw it. A sorrel gelding. The saddle was a standard Texas rig, but the bedroll was tied on behind it with a specific hitch, a diamond, but finished with a quick-release double loop that Jesse had always called his Mule Tears signature. He claimed he invented it. Eliza's breath caught in her throat. She stepped closer, her heart pounding a sick, slow rhythm. She knew that knot. She had watched him tie it 1,000 times. This was Jesse's horse. The man who had ridden this horse, the man who had come to kill her for the map, had been riding her brother's horse. Tahan came to stand beside her. He, too, was looking at the knot. He said nothing, simply waited. "This was my brother's," Eliza said, her voice cracking. Tahan nodded slowly, the pieces fitting together in his mind. The woman, the map, the brother, the railroad. "The men who serve Rourke," Tahan said, his voice quiet. "They are building their camp. They prepare to measure the land. They mean to blast the rock." He looked up at the sky. The moon was a pale sliver, a ghost against the blue, nearly gone. "We have 10 days, he said. 10 days until the new moon. That is the time they have chosen. That is when they will come to Murakay to steal the water." Eliza stared at the knot, Her brother's signature. The clock was ticking, and the sound was like a hammer on an anvil. The knot. Eliza Hart could not look away from it. It was a small, tight, intricate thing, a diamond weave finished with a double loop. Jesse's signature. He had tied that knot onto every bedroll, every feed sack, every rope he ever owned, ever since he was 12 years old and proud of his own invention. It meant this horse, this saddle, belonged to her brother, and it had been ridden by a man who came to kill her. The implications twisted in her gut, cold and sharp. Had Jesse joined them? Was he a part of this? No. Her mind recoiled from the thought. Not Jesse. He was idealistic, sometimes foolish, but his compass was true. Then another, colder possibility took its place. He had not joined them. He had been captured, or he was dead, and they had taken his horse. Tahan stood beside her at the corral rail, his silence a heavy presence. He watched her face, saw the color drain from it, saw the recognition harden into a mask of fear. Nokoni was nearby, checking the shod hoof of his own pony, but his attention was also on her. Behind them, Mrs. Belle hovered near the door of the sod house, wringing her hands in her apron. The arrival of the bullet-marked coach, the wounded preacher, and the Commanche escorts had shattered the station's routine. She looked from Eliza to Tahan, her earlier confidence gone, replaced by a jittery fear. "Miss Hart," the older woman called, her voice thin. "That brother of yours, Jesse." Eliza turned, her eyes narrowed. What about him? He was here, weeks ago. He was quiet, not like he used to be. Mrs. Belle twisted her apron. "He left something. For you. He said if a woman came asking, a woman with his name, he left this. It got mixed in with the waybills. I just remembered." She scurried inside and returned, holding a folded envelope. It was stained with grease and what looked like coffee. Eliza's name was written on it in Jesse's familiar, impatient scrawl. Her hands were numb as she took it. She tore it open. The paper was cheap, the pencil lead faint. "Eliza." "I am playing a part. Do not worry. I signed on with the Red Mesa survey crew. It was the only way to get close. This is not just a railroad. They are not following the government grade. They are financed by a man named Baron Hale, and his man on the ground, Caleb Rourke, is a brute. They are planning to dam the Murakay, not just divert it. Dam it! Steal the entire water source for the high basin, create a private lake. They will sell the water rights for a fortune. They will break the Commanche, and they will hold every rancher in this territory hostage. I have the real blueprints, the ones that show the dam. I am trying to get them to the marshals. Rourke is the devil's own. He trusts no one. If I am not at the Red Rock Rendezvous on the 1st of the month, assume the worst. I fear the deputy in town, Weller, is on their payroll. Trust no one. Burn this." "Jay." The paper trembled. A lightning strike. He was not a traitor. He was a spy. He was investigating. And he had been caught. The attack on the coach, the man on Jesse's horse, it was not a robbery. It was a purge. They knew he had evidence. And now they knew he had sent a map to his sister. They were cleaning up every loose end. And she was a very loose end. She looked up from the letter, her eyes finding Tahan's. He had not moved, but he had watched every flicker of emotion cross her face. She did not need to explain. "He is alive," she said. It was not a question. It was a statement of raw, desperate hope. "They have him." "Yes," Tahan said. "They have him. A live man who knows their secrets is a danger. They would not keep him long." "No," Eliza said, crushing the letter in her fist. "They need him. He's a surveyor, the best they could find. They need him to finish the work. They will keep him alive until the dam is built, until they do not need him anymore." Her objective, which had been a fog of finding a lost brother, snapped into sharp, terrifying focus. She had to find Jesse. She had to expose this entire, rotten scheme. Tahan looked past her, at the open prairie, His own goal was just as clear. This Baron Hale, this Rourke, they will not have Murakay. It is the people's water. It is the people's heart. The sun was sinking, painting the bottom edges of the high, thin clouds in shades of bloody orange and violet. The wind turned cold. Eliza walked away from the station house, away from the prying eyes of Mrs. Bell. Tahan and Nokoni followed. They stopped by the rickety windmill, its blades turning with a rhythmic, mournful squeak. Caleb Rourke, Eliza said, testing the name. Jesse called him the devil's own. He led militia in Colorado, Tahan said, his voice flat. He fought for no flag. He fought for gold. He hunted my people. He hunted the Kiowa, the Cheyenne. He does not take prisoners. He works for Baron Hale, Eliza said, the name feeling foreign and heavy. A rich man from back east, I suppose. The kind who buys the land without ever walking on it. Nokoni spoke then, a short, guttural sentence in his own tongue. Tahan nodded. Nokoni says the man in town, the one with the star. Deputy Weller. He is Rourke's man. We saw them. They drink together. Weller eats from Rourke's hand. If we fight them, Weller will not bring the law. He will call us renegades. He will say we are inciting a riot. He will give Rourke the paper to hunt us down. Then the law will not help us. Eliza said. The last of her naivety burned away in the cold prairie wind. It was her, Jesse's map, and these two men against a railroad. Its hired guns, and the local law. The odds were impossible. They were suicidal. I do not care what they call it, she said, her voice hard as iron. They have my brother. Tahan looked at her, a long, assessing gaze. He was weighing her, her resolve, her strength. He was deciding if she was a tool or a partner. He raised his arm and pointed, not at the station, but out at the twilight plains. There. Eliza squinted. At first, she saw nothing but the endless grass, turning purple in the dying light. Then she saw it, a speck of wrongness, a thin wooden stake, driven deep into the sod. A strip of red flannel, torn and flapping, was tied to its top. A survey marker, she whispered. We have pulled up many, Tahan said. They come back, like ants. They cut the skin of the earth. They pound these wounds into her. They do not ask. They bleed the land dry. Eliza's hand went to her chest, to the crisp paper folded there. Jesse's map. This map, she said. It shows the water. It shows where the life is. She looked at the red stake. Theirs only show the cuts. The wind gusted, sharp and carrying the first real bite of night. Eliza shivered, pulling her worn jacket tighter. Tahan watched her. He spoke a single word, low, into the wind, Tuhub. Without thinking, from a place of deep, buried memory. Eliza responded. Yes, she said, Tuhubitu. It is very cold. The word was out before she could stop it. It was a fragment of a language she had not heard since she was 6 years old, when her father's first ranch had bordered Kiowa land, before the treaties and the removals. A Kiowa family had camped near their spring. The woman had sometimes shared fry bread. Eliza remembered the word for water, paha, and the word for wind, for cold. The Kiowa language was cousin to his own. The effect on both men was immediate. Nokoni, who had been standing impassive as a rock, turned his head sharply. Tahan's stoic expression cracked. His eyes, dark and watchful, widened almost imperceptibly. He looked at her not as a white woman, not as a settler, but as something else. You know the tongue, he said. It was not a question, but an accusation, heavy with suspicion. No, Eliza said quickly, feeling her face flush. Not really. A few words. When I was a child, my family, we lived near the people. A Kiowa family. They, I remember, just a little. Tahan held her gaze for a long moment. The suspicion did not leave his eyes, but something else joined it. A flicker of curiosity, a reevaluation. She was not just another face in the flood of newcomers. She was a woman who held a memory of his people's words, a woman whose brother had given his freedom, and perhaps his life, to protect Murakay. The alliance, moments before a fragile, practical arrangement, shifted. It settled onto a deeper, more personal foundation. He nodded slowly. "Kiowa, they are our cousins. Your memory is long." The time for talk was over. They could not stay at the Half Moon. Mrs. Bell, whether from fear or for pay, was not to be trusted. Rourke's men would be back. They would not leave witnesses. Tahan turned and walked to his horse. From a pouch on his saddle, he took a small, wrapped bundle of hide. He unrolled it carefully. Inside lay 3 eagle feathers. They were perfect, dark, barred with white, the tips clean. He took one. He walked back to Eliza. The last light of the sunset caught the silver in his dark hair. "My people do not make promises with paper," he said, his voice low, pitched beneath the moan of the windmill. He glanced at the station house, where a yellow lamplight now glowed. "Paper lies." He nodded, thinking of the forged writ of seizure. He held the single, beautiful feather out to her. Quill first. "This is from the eagle. He is the messenger. He sees far. He flies closest to the Great Spirit." He did not offer it. He waited. Eliza understood. This was a choice, a commitment. She could take the feather and step into his world, into his fight, or she could refuse and try to make her own way, a path that would certainly lead to her death and the loss of her brother. Slowly, she held out her hand. Tahan placed the feather in her palm. The barbs were soft, the quill stiff and strong. It felt heavier than it looked. "If we go," Tahan said, his eyes locking onto hers. "We go together. We do not turn back. We go to the end." Eliza looked from the feather to his face. She saw the lines carved by sun and sorrow. She saw the unbending will. She saw the first man she had met in this territory who was not trying to take something. He was trying to protect it. Her fingers closed around the quill. "To the end," she said. Her voice was steady. A silent understanding passed between them. Tahan gave a short, sharp nod. He and Nokoni moved to their horses. Eliza walked to her own mare, securing the eagle feather deep inside her saddlebag, where it lay against the worn leather and the memory of her brother's map. She put Jesse's letter in her boot, pulled her hat low, and swung into the saddle. Without a word, the 3 riders turned their horses away from the faint, treacherous light of the half-moon station. They blended into the vast, open darkness of the Llano Estacado, the squeak of the windmill the only sound, quickly swallowed by the rising wind. The hunt had begun. They rode away from the station under a sky so vast and dark it seemed to press down on the land. The stars were sharp, cold chips of ice. There was no moon. Tahan led. Nokoni rode slightly to the left, and Eliza followed, her mare sensing the tension, walking with a quick, nervous step. They moved without speaking for hours, letting the horses pick their way through the dark, trusting the animal's night vision. The only sound was the creak of saddle leather and the steady whisper of the wind through the endless grass. When the first gray light of dawn touched the eastern rim of the world, Tahan stopped. He dismounted in one fluid motion and knelt, his hand hovering over the ground. Eliza pulled up beside him, her body stiff and sore. "What is it?" she asked, her voice a low rasp. Tahan did not look up. He pointed. At first, Eliza saw nothing but churned earth, the tracks of Rourke's men, shod horses, a dozen or more. They were sloppy, arrogant, making no effort to hide their passage. "They ride fast," Tahan said. "They are not trying to follow a trail. They are going to a place they already know." He meant the survey camp. "Jesse," Eliza said, swinging down from her mare. She walked past him, her eyes scanning the ground with a lifetime of practice. She had been reading tracks since she was old enough to walk. Her father had taught her, but Jesse had made it a game. He was the one who could find the one faint print on bare rock. And she found it. It was apart from the main group of tracks, almost hidden in a patch of scrub. A single set of hoof prints, a gelding, moving northeast. The prints were clear, except one, the right forefoot. It was missing the outer half of the iron shoe. It was a specific, recognizable print. "He is here," she whispered, her fingers tracing the sharp edge of the print in the cool dirt. "He is alive." Tahan and Nokoni looked at her, then at the track. Nokoni grunted, a sound of dismissal. "One horse," he said in English. "Crippled. He will not get far." "No," Eliza said, standing. "You do not understand. It is a trick. Jesse taught it to me. When you are being followed, or you want to leave a trail only one person can read, you break a shoe, not pull it off entirely. You break it, so it leaves a mark, but looks like a lame horse. Most trackers will ignore it. They will think it is just a stray, or an animal not worth catching." She looked at Tahan. "He is leaving a trail for me. He knew I would come. He knew I would look for this." Tahan's expression did not change, but a new light of respect entered his eyes. He had read the track as a lame horse. She had read it as a message. He looked at the print again, then at her. He nodded. "Your brother is smart, like the coyote, who limps when the wolf is watching." They left the wide, brutal trail of Rourke's men and turned to follow the single, subtle track of the broken shoe. It led them northeast, just as Jesse's faint pencil scrawl had indicated, toward Box Canyon. The land grew rougher, the flat prairie breaking into arroyos and shallow canyons. The sun climbed, a merciless white eye. The heat was a physical weight. They stopped at noon to water the horses at a seep, a patch of damp earth that Tahan found by the cluster of green rabbit brush. They ate jerky and hardtack, a grim, silent meal. Eliza found herself watching Tahan. He moved with an economy of motion, wasting nothing. Not a drop of water, not a word, not a gesture. When he finished his small portion, he took a handful of cornmeal from his pouch, mixed it with water and ash, and rubbed it over a raw spot on his horse's back. He cared for the animal before himself. Eliza felt a small, strange easing in her chest. Her father had always taught her a man who is good to his horse has good in his heart. She had always found it to be true. She took out her own small tin of ointment and began to check her mare's hooves. They worked in silence, a shared ritual of care. By mid-afternoon, the sky had changed. The brilliant blue was gone, replaced by a bruised yellowish gray. The air grew heavy, static, the wind dying to an uneasy stillness. Tahan stopped, his head raised, sniffing the air. "It comes," he said, and swung into his saddle. "What does?" Eliza asked. "Mounting?" "Water," Nokoni said, his eyes on the horizon. Before Eliza could ask, the world exploded. A wall of wind hit them, a physical blow that staggered the horses. It was not rain. It was a solid sheet of brown, a sandstorm that turned noon into midnight. Grit filled her mouth, her eyes, her nose. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in a minute. "Cover your face!" Tahan shouted over the roar. Then the rain came, not as drops, but as a deluge, a river falling from the sky. It turned the dust to instant, thick mud. Thunder cracked overhead, so loud it felt like a blow to the chest. "The arroyo!" Tahan yelled, pointing. They had been following the track along the edge of a dry wash. It was not dry anymore. A low growl was coming from its depths. "We must climb now." They spurred their horses up the slick, crumbling bank. They were too late. The growl became a roar, and a 4-foot wall of brown, churning water, filled with brush and debris, slammed down the canyon. The ground shuddered. "This way." Tahan grabbed her mare's bridle, pulling her along the rim. The horses slipped and scrambled, their eyes wide with terror. The storm was a primal force, blind and furious. They were exposed, helpless. Nokoni pointed. "There, a hollow." It was a dark slash in the rock face. A shallow cave eroded by wind and time. It was not deep, but it was shelter. They half dragged, half fell from their horses, pushing the animals in first. The horses crowded into the back, trembling. Eliza, Tahan, and Nokoni huddled near the mouth, the rain lashing in, soaking them in seconds. They watched the arroyo, now a raging, muddy torrent. It had all happened in less than 5 minutes. The land they had been riding on was now under water, a violent, temporary river. "We would be dead," Eliza whispered, her voice shaking. "The land gives life," Tahan said, his voice quiet beside her. "And it takes it. It demands respect." They were trapped. The storm raged for an hour, then 2. The air grew cold. They were soaked to the skin, shivering. Nokoni, ever practical, unlashed a hide from his saddle and began the patient, difficult work of trying to start a small, smokeless fire with a fire drill, shielding the spark with his own body. Eliza pressed back against the rock, trying to escape the driving wind. Her hand touched the wall. It was not just rough, it was carved. Her eyes adjusted to the gloom. The entire back wall of the cave was covered in paintings. They were red and yellow and black. Images of bison, of deer, of men with bows, and hands. Dozens of hands. Outlines left by blowing pigment over a spread palm. They were ancient, the rock itself imbued with their memory. Tahan came to stand beside her. The small fire Nokoni had managed to start cast a flickering, uncertain light. "The old ones," Tahan said. He touched the outline of one small hand. "The grandfathers. They came here for shelter, just as we do. They put their hands on the rock to say, 'We were here.' To say, 'This place is sacred. This is our home.'" He pointed to a large, swirling symbol. "The water. The life." He pointed to a figure that was half man, half bison, the spirit of the herd. Eliza listened. She was not just hearing his words. She was feeling the cold stone, seeing the painted hands, smelling the damp earth and the smoke. For the first time, this land did not feel like a hostile, empty place she had to cross. It felt like a room. It felt inhabited by the ghosts of 1,000 years. She was the intruder, not him. She understood. In that moment, what he was fighting for, it was not just water, it was the memory in the stone. "They are beautiful," she said. Tahan looked at her, his dark eyes lit by the fire. He gave a single, slow nod. The shared moment of awe was a stronger bond than any promise. The storm passed as quickly as it had come. The water in the arroyo began to recede, leaving behind a steaming world of mud. They led the horses out. The track was gone, washed away. "Now what?" Eliza asked, the old despair returning. Tahan pointed to the sun, now breaking through the clouds. "Box Canyon is northeast. Your brother is smart. He knows the land. He will go to high ground. He will find shelter. He will leave another sign." They rode on, the world washed clean and dangerous. The mud was deep, pulling at the horses' hooves. It was slow, hard going. Late in the afternoon, they topped a rise. Below them was a small, ramshackle settlement, a trading post, a saloon made of tents, and a blacksmith shop. A group of men were gathered near the trading post, listening to a man on a wagon. "We go around," Tahan said, pulling his horse back. "No, wait," Eliza said. "Let us listen. We need to know what Rourke is telling people." They dismounted, leaving the horses with Nokoni, and crept closer, hidden by a stand of juniper. The man on the wagon was not Rourke. He was a politician, or pretended to be. He was sweating in a wool suit, his voice booming. "The Red Mesa and Pacific is not just a railroad, my friends. It is salvation. It is jobs. It is progress. It will bring ice in the summer and lumber in the winter. It will build a new city here. All that stands in our way is a handful of renegades, savages who want to keep this land barren and the government men who listened to them. A man in the crowd shouted, "What about the water rights?" "The railroad will secure the water," the man yelled. "It will build reservoirs. There will be water for everyone. Anyone who says different is a liar and an enemy of progress. An enemy of this town." The crowd cheered. Eliza felt sick. Rourke was not just using guns. He was using greed, painting himself as a savior and Tahan's people as the enemy, and her, by extension. Anyone who stood against the dam would be seen as an enemy of the people. "We go," Tahan said, his voice like flint. "Their ears are full of lies." They rode hard, leaving the town behind. As twilight fell, they entered the mouth of Box Canyon. The walls rose high and sheer, red rock in the dying light. Tahan found the tracks again. On a sandy bank the flood had missed, the broken shoe. Jesse had been here. Then Tahan stopped. He held up a hand. A rifle shot cracked the air. A puff of dust exploded from the rock 10 feet above Eliza's head. "Surveyors," Nokoni hissed, pulling his horse back. High up on the canyon rim, 2 men stood, silhouetted against the sky. They raised their rifles again. "Warning shot," Tahan said, his voice calm. "They do not see us clearly. They see movement." "They are Rourke's men," Eliza said, her hand going to the rifle in her saddle scabbard. Her first instinct was to fire back. Revenge for the coach. For Jesse? "No," Tahan said, grabbing her arm. "That is what they want. They will say we attacked them. They will hunt us. We are shadows." He began to back his horse into a cluster of boulders. But Eliza had an idea, a desperate, foolish idea. "Wait," she said. She held her reins in one hand. She raised her other hand, high and clear, in the open. She held up her index and middle fingers, then crossed them, then pointed to her own eye. 2 fingers, crossed. "I see you." It was a sign, a game she and Jesse had played as children. It meant, "I am here. I am a friend. Do not shoot." One of the men on the rim lowered his rifle. He seemed to hesitate. He looked at his partner, then he slowly, deliberately, turned his back and walked away from the rim. The other man, after a moment, followed him. Eliza let out a breath she did not know she was holding. "He saw me. I think one of them is Jesse's man." "Or it is a trap," Nokoni said, his face grim. "It is hope," Eliza insisted. They waited until full dark, then moved deeper into the canyon. Tahan led them, his senses now their only guide. He stopped at a thicket of cottonwood trees. "He was here," Tahan whispered. He pointed. Eliza dismounted. There, stuck deep into the trunk of the largest tree, was a knife. It was a Bowie knife, with a handle of antler horn. She had given it to Jesse on his 18th birthday. Her hand trembled as she pulled it free. It was not just the knife. Carved into the bark just below it was a symbol, a rough circle for a full moon, and an arrow pointing northeast. "Turn northeast at the full moon," she translated. The full moon was in 3 days. She had been torn. Part of her wanted to ride into Rourke's camp, a storm of vengeance. But the knife, the sign, it was Jesse's voice. He was not asking for revenge. He was asking for a rescue. He was telling her to be smart, to follow the plan. She looked at Tahan. "The survey camp. It must be northeast of here." "It is," Tahan said. "Rourke has built a sod fort near the headwaters of the Murakay." "Jesse's letter," Eliza said, her mind racing. "He said he had blueprints, proof. They are probably in that camp, in Rourke's tent, his logbooks, his orders from Baron Hale. If we are going to stop this, we do not just need Jesse. We need that proof." Tahan looked at Nokoni. This was a new, dangerous step. An alliance was one thing, a raid was another. He was torn between his duty to protect his people, which meant avoiding a direct fight, and the realization that this woman, this Tubokanai, this white woman who spoke with Kiowa words and saw the paintings, might be their only chance. Her plan was bold. It was also the only way. "We need the papers," Tahan agreed. "We must show the liars to the people in the town. We must show them the truth." He looked at Eliza. The respect in his eyes was deep and true. "We will rest. Then we will find this camp. We will go in, not as a storm, but as smoke. We will take what they value, and we will vanish." The survey camp was a raw wound on the high plains. It squatted near the headwaters of Morocay, a cluster of dirty canvas tents and a half-built sod fortress, all surrounded by a perimeter of wagons and stacked crates. Yellow lamplight leaked from 3 tents. Men's voices, rough and carrying on the night air, drifted from a central campfire. Tahan, Eliza, and Nokoni lay on their bellies on a low ridge, the dry, cold grass pricking their faces. They had been watching for an hour, mapping the movements of the guards. There were 4, one at each corner of the loose square, lazy and overconfident. "That one," Tahan whispered, his voice barely astir in the wind. He pointed to the largest tent, set slightly apart. A single lamp burned inside. A man's shadow passed the canvas. Rourke, his den. The guard on the west side. Eliza whispered back, her heart a tight drum. "He is the problem. He paces between the wagon and the tent." "Nokoni will watch the horses," Tahan said. "And the east, he will make the sound of the coyote if Rourke returns from the fire." Nokoni nodded, a shadow detaching from their own, and slipped back toward the gully where the horses were hidden. "The disguise," Tahan said. Eliza pulled the items from her saddlebag, a greasy, wide-brimmed hat she had found near the trading post, and a stained canvas coat, stiff with dirt. She tucked her hair, the color of a corn silk, deep under the hat, and shrugged into the heavy coat. It smelled of sweat and tobacco. She rubbed dust from the ground onto her cheeks, shadowing her face. She was small, but in the dark, hunched over. She might pass for a young camp hand. "The water buckets are by the cook tent," she said. "The guard watches me pick them up. He will think I'm going to the creek. That will get me past him. Then I go to Rourke's tent." "I will be the shadow on that guard's back," Tahan said. He uncoiled a thin, strong lariat from his belt. It was not for a horse. It was a short, braided leather rope. "When you pass the wagon, do not look back. Go to the tent. Get the papers. I will meet you at the boneyard. North." He was telling her to trust him to do his part, and to do hers without hesitation. Eliza nodded. She let out a long, slow breath and slid down the ridge. She moved in a low crouch, keeping to the shadows of the supply stacks. She reached the cook tent. The 2 empty wooden buckets were there. She picked them up, the rope handles biting into her palms. She stood, and with her head down, began the walk. She kept her shoulders stooped, her steps a shuffling, weary gait. The west guard, a thick man with a rifle held loosely in his arm, saw her. He grunted. "Water about time," he said. His voice was bored. "Rourke's been hollering for a fresh bucket for an hour." Eliza just grunted in reply, not trusting her voice, and kept walking. She passed him. His gaze followed her for a moment, then went back to the campfire. She was 10 steps past him when she heard it, a sound like a sudden exhale, a scuffle of boots in the dust. She did not look back. She could not. She walked faster, rounding the corner of the wagon, and broke into a silent run for Rourke's tent. Behind her, in the dark, Tahan had moved like a hunting cat. The leather rope looped over the guard's head, cinching tight across his mouth and throat, cutting off his shout. Tahan pulled him backward, off balance, into the deep shadow between 2 wagons. There was a brief, muffled struggle, the sound of a body slumping, then the quiet sound of Tahan binding the man's hands and feet. He had disabled him, not killed him. A silent, necessary act. Eliza reached the tent. The flap was open. She slipped inside. It was warm, smelling of lamp oil, whiskey, and leather. A cot was in one corner. In the center, A rough plank desk was littered with papers, tin cups, and a heavy revolver. She saw it instantly. A thick, leather-bound book, a ledger. Her hands shook as she opened it. It was not just numbers. It was a journal. She saw the name Deputy Weller, $500. She saw another entry, ammunition and blasting powder, 10 crates. For Murakay Channel, set charges at Ancestor Rock. There it was, the proof. Under the ledger was a rolled canvas, tied with a ribbon. She untied it. It was a blueprint, Jesse's meticulous hand. It showed the canyon, the creek, and drawn over it, in heavy black ink, were the lines of a massive earthen dam. It was the plan. She grabbed the ledger and the rolled map. A voice from outside. "Hey, Silas, you see that kid? He ain't come back from the creek." A dog barked, a deep, angry sound. "Go check on him." A new voice commanded, "Rourke." The alarm was raised. Eliza's blood went cold. She looked at the back of the tent. There was a slit, tied shut with leather. She pulled Jesse's knife from her boot and sliced the ties. She burst through the canvas and ran. "There, stop!" a man shouted. A gunshot cracked the night air. The bullet whined past her ear. She ran, clutching the book and the map, sprinting for the dark line on the prairie that Tahan had called the boneyard. She heard Tahan's low whistle to her left, guiding her. Men were shouting, boots pounding behind her. She burst over a low rise and the ground changed. It was no longer soft earth. It was a vast, pale carpet of bones. A field of white, luminous in the starlight. The remains of 1,000,000 buffalo, slaughtered for their hides. Skulls, ribs, and vertebrae lay in tangled, broken piles. It was a graveyard that stretched for miles. The awful, silent monument to the greed that was fueling Rourke. The railroad, and the men now chasing her. Her boots crunched on the brittle bones. It was a horrifying, hollow sound. Tahan was beside her. "This way, do not stop." They ran, leaping over spinal columns, ducking behind hills of skulls. The men behind them were slower, cursing as they stumbled on the treacherous, uneven ground. More shots. The bullets kicked up splinters of bone. The world turned to chaos. The wind, which had been a steady moan, rose to a shriek. The stars vanished, blotted out. A wall of sand, the same fury that had trapped them in the canyon, slammed into their backs. "The storm!" Tahan yelled, grabbing her arm. "It is our shield!" The sand scourged their faces, blinding them, choking them. They could no longer hear their pursuers. Tahan pulled her, half dragging, through the suffocating darkness. They stumbled, fell, and rose again, their only guide the force of the wind at their backs. "Here!" Tahan shouted, his voice almost stolen by the wind. He pulled her down. They tumbled into a hollow, a deep depression between two tall sand dunes that had piled up against the boneyard. It was a drift, a small, protected pocket. The wind howled over their heads, but in the lee of the dune, the air was almost still. They lay gasping for breath, their lungs burning, their bodies shaking. They were alive. They were safe. For now. Eliza still clutched the ledger and the map. "We made it," she panted, her voice trembling with exhaustion and relief. Tahan said nothing. He was already working, pulling dry roots and brush from the side of the dune, using his body to shield his small flint and steel. After several agonizing minutes, a tiny spark caught. He fed it, nurtured it, and a small, precious fire flickered to life. It cast a weak, dancing light on their small shelter. The cold was immediate, sinking deep now that they had stopped running. Eliza huddled close to the flames, her whole body shaking. She was exhausted, soaked in sweat that was now turning to ice. She pulled her knees to her chest, curling into a tight ball beside the fire, trying to hold in any warmth. She was so cold, so tired, she could barely think. She felt her eyelids grow heavy. She curled to sleep beside the fire. The wind shifted. A sudden violent gust swept into the hollow, scattering sparks and threatening to extinguish their tiny flame. Eliza flinched, but she was too deep in her exhaustion to move. Then Tahan pulled her back. Tahan's arm was strong, not rough, but insistent. He pulled her away from the scattering sparks, back against the solid wall of the dune. He shifted his own body, placing himself between her and the wind, creating a better windbreak. The fire, protected, steadied. Eliza shivered, a deep, bone-shaking tremor. Tahan reached for his saddle roll, which he had carried on his back. He unfolded a heavy buffalo robe, tanned and supple with age, the hair thick and warm. He draped it over her, covering her from her shoulders to her feet. The warmth was immediate, a profound relief that made her want to weep. He did not move away. The hollow was small, the fire tiny. The wind howled like a hungry wolf outside their sanctuary. Tahan sat beside her, so close their shoulders touched. He pulled the edge of the robe over himself as well, creating a shared pocket of warmth. Eliza tensed for a moment, a lifetime of warnings running through her. But this was not an act of aggression. It was an act of care, the same care he showed his horse. He felt her tension, and he spoke. His voice was low, soft, not in his careful English, but in his own tongue, the words flowing like water over stones. He spoke of the cold. He spoke of the fire. He said that a fire shared burns brightest. He said that, in his way, a man does not take a woman. He chooses her. He chooses to put his strength between her and the storm. He chooses to see her, to guard her sleep, to protect her as he would protect his own heart, his own Tuhuya. Eliza did not understand all the words, but she understood the meaning. It was in the shelter of his body. It was in the weight of the warm, shared robe. This was not possession. This was protection. She was exhausted, but she was awake. She was cold, but she was warm. She felt a profound and quiet click, as if a lock she did not know was broken had just been mended. She lifted her hand, trembling with cold and fatigue, and laid it on the thick fur of the robe that covered them both. It was an answer, an acceptance, a vow returned. Tahan looked at her in the flickering light. His face was hard, carved by the wind and the firelight, but his eyes were not. He waited a long moment, the storm raging around them. Then he spoke again, back in his careful English, his voice a low promise. "After this," he said, "when the water is safe, when your brother is found, I will speak to the council of elders, and I will speak to you about a home." Eliza closed her eyes. A home. The word was something she had not let herself think about for years. It was a place she thought was lost with her childhood, with Jessie's disappearance. But here, in a hole in the sand, surrounded by a field of bones, with a Commanche warrior, she felt the first fragile seed of it. She did not sleep. They rested, sharing the silence, the warmth, and the duty. As the first hint of gray light touched the sky, the wind began to die. The storm had passed. Eliza sat up, pushing the heavy robe back. The fire was almost embers. She looked at the ledger in her lap. "We have it," she said, her voice raw. "We have the proof." Tahan was already on his feet, scattering the embers, erasing their camp. "Rourke is not a fool," he said. "He knows what we took. He knows where we will go." "To town," Eliza said, standing, her muscles screaming in protest. "To the marshal. We have to show this to the people before he can lie his way out of it." "He knows," Tahan repeated. He looked south, in the direction of the trading post, the town. "There is only one fast way across the lowlands, the old pike bridge. It is timber. It is narrow." Eliza's blood ran cold. A trap. "He will be there." Tahan said, "He will cut the road, and he will be waiting for us." The ride back to Nokoni was a silent one, a heavy press of dread and exhaustion. They found him where they had left him, A sentinel with the horses hidden in a deep ravine carved by ancient water. He had seen the sandstorm, seen the flicker of gunfire, and had waited, his patience carved from the same stone as the canyon. When they slid from their horses, caked in dust, Eliza clutching the ledger and the map, his eyes asked the question. Tahan spoke, his voice low. In the Commanche tongue, he told of the raid, the ledger, the dog, the chase. He told of the boneyard and the shelter of the sand. Nokoni listened, his broad, placid face unmoving. When Tahan finished, he nodded once, a gesture of profound satisfaction. He looked at Eliza, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something like a smile in his eyes. It was a warrior's approval. The victory was ice, melting in their hands. Rourke will not sleep, Tahan said, checking his horse's cinch, his movements economical and grim. He knows what we have. He knows where we must go. The town, Eliza said, her voice a dry rasp. We have to show this to a real lawman, not Weller. To town, Tahan agreed. There is one way to cross the Red Muddy River fast. The old Pike Bridge, a bottleneck. He will be there. Nokoni was already mounted, his rifle in his hand. He looked at Tahan. We know. Let us ride. They rode with the sun at their backs, a hard, fast pace, pushing the animals. They were three small figures in a vast, indifferent landscape. They moved from wash to gully, avoiding the open ridges, but the bridge was a fixed point, a trap they had to walk into. They heard the river before they saw it, a low, muddy growl. The old Pike Bridge was a skeletal thing, built of sun-bleached timber and hope. It sagged in the middle, spanning a wide, brown torrent, thick from the flash flood. On the far side, the road cut through a tumble of red rocks, a perfect place for an ambush. They stopped. Tahan dismounted, handing his reins to Eliza. He and Nokoni moved forward on foot, shadows slipping through the tall salt grass and willow thickets that lined the riverbank. Eliza waited, her heart hammering against her ribs. The ledger was in her saddlebag, heavy as a sack of lead. She had Jesse's knife in her boot. The rifle Nokoni had given her was in her scabbard. The one with his feather... No, that was wrong. The feather was Tahan's. Her feather. An agonizing 5 minutes passed. Then Tahan was back. His face was grim. They are there, he whispered. 4 of them, hidden in the rocks. They have the high ground. We cannot go around. The river is too deep, the mud too soft. It is the bridge, or nothing. How? Eliza asked. Before he could answer, Nokoni appeared. He did not speak. He pointed to his horse, then to himself, then at the rocks across the river. He was going to draw their fire, a diversion. No, Tahan said, a sharp, hard command. Nokoni just looked at him, his face set. He put his hand on Tahan's shoulder. It is the only way. You must get the papers to the people. He was not asking. He was telling. He was the older, heavier man. He was the shield. Before Tahan could argue, Nokoni swung into his saddle. He let out a high, piercing cry, a Kiowa war song. He kicked his pony, charging from the cover of the willows, not at the bridge, but downriver. A full, exposed run, a perfect target. The first shot cracked from the rocks, then a volley. 4 rifles firing at the lone rider. Now, Tahan yelled. He grabbed Eliza's rein and pulled, yanking her mare into a gallop. Ride, do not stop. They burst onto the bridge. The wooden planks clattered and boomed under the hooves. Eliza bent low, her face pressed to her horse's neck. Bullets snapped past her, whining, thudding into the timber. She saw Nokoni, 50 yards downriver. He was still upright, still charging, though his horse was stumbling. He was pulling their fire, giving them the seconds they needed. They were halfway across. Tahan was in front. A bullet struck his saddle, the sound a wet, heavy thump. His horse screamed, rearing, crashing sideways. The ancient wooden railing of the bridge splintered. Tahan was thrown. He did not fall into the river. He was a good horseman, twisting even as he fell, but his lariat, coiled on his saddle, had been hit. The rope had sprung loose, tangling around his arm, snagging on the broken, jagged timber of the railing. He was dangling, half on, half off the bridge, his arm trapped, exposed. A man stood up from the rocks. He was not shooting at Nokoni, who was now falling into the shallow water. He was taking his time, drawing a careful, killing bead on the helpless, hanging figure of Tahan. Eliza had no time to think. She did not reach for her rifle. She hauled her mare to a stop. A skidding, terrible sound. She leaped from the saddle. In one motion, she was on her knees, Jesse's knife in her hand. The gunman was raising his rifle. She slashed at the taut, thick hemp of the lariat. The knife was sharp. It bit deep. Once, twice, the rope snapped. Tahan fell. He dropped 3 feet, landing hard on a lower support beam. A heavy cross brace just above the muddy water. The gunman's shot exploded, smashing a cloud of splinters from the exact spot where Tahan had been trapped. "Go!" Tahan roared from below, scrambling along the beam. Eliza did not wait. She grabbed her mare's reins, swung into the saddle, and kicked. She galloped off the bridge, plunging into the cover of the rocks on the far side. Just as Tahan pulled himself up the bank. The fight was not over. Tahan, his face a mask of cold, terrible fury, grabbed the rifle from her scabbard. He moved into the rocks. Eliza followed. The ambushers were confused. Their targets were on their side of the river. They found Nokoni's work. He had drawn their fire, but he had also closed with one of their nests. He lay beside his dead horse, his knife in his hand. 2 of Rourke's men were dead beside him, victims of his last desperate charge. Tahan knelt beside his friend. He closed Nokoni's eyes. He said nothing. The silence was louder than any scream. A sound, a man, crawling, his legs shattered by one of Nokoni's shots. He was the last one. Tahan was on him in a second, his foot on the man's back, the rifle muzzle pressed to his head. "Wait!" Eliza yelled, running up. She was holding the ledger. "He is no good to us dead." She knelt, her face inches from the man's. He was terrified, looking from her to Tahan. "My brother," she said, her voice shaking. "Jesse Hart, the surveyor! Where is he?" "I don't know," the man whimpered. Tahan pressed the rifle harder. "Wait, yes, I do," the man screamed. "He is alive. Rourke didn't kill him. He is at the quarry, the limestone quarry, 20 miles west." Eliza's heart stopped, then restarted with a painful jolt. "He is alive." "Why?" Tahan's voice was a dead thing. "Why keep him?" "Rourke needs him," the man gasped. "He needs him to finish the work, setting the pylon footings. He's got him and a dozen others working as prisoners. Forced labor. Rourke said he would bury them all in the rock when the job was done." Eliza felt a cold wave of sickness, followed by a hot surge of hope. Alive. He was alive. Tahan searched the man, then the bodies of the others. He found a folded paper in one man's pocket. He read it, his face growing even harder. If that were possible. "What?" Eliza asked. Tahan held out the paper. It was a work order, signed by Caleb Rourke. It detailed the transport of 10 crates of blasting powder. "He is not waiting," Tahan said, his voice flat. "He is at Murakay, now. He is setting the charges. He will blast the ancestor rock. He will seal the canyon to build his bridge." He pointed to the date. 48 hours. We have 2 days, then he lights the fuse. The air went thin. 2 days. Eliza's mind snapped to a single point. "The quarry! We ride to the quarry! Now!" Tahan looked at her, his eyes hollowed by grief. "The quarry is west. Murakay is east. We ride to the canyon. We must stop the dynamite." "My brother is in that quarry," Eliza cried, the tight control she had held for days finally breaking. They will murder him. I am not leaving him there for one more minute. And I, Tahan said, his voice a low, dangerous growl, am not leaving my friend here, his death for nothing. He gestured to Nokoni's body. He died to get these papers to the town. He died to save Murakei. I will not fail him. The water comes first. What about my brother? She shouted, tears of rage and fear cutting trails in the dust on her face. Is he nothing? If Murakei dies, we all die. Tahan said, your brother's sacrifice will mean nothing. They stared at each other, two unmovable objects, the air crackling between them. They were both right, and they were both losing. Eliza took a ragged breath. She looked at Nokoni's body. She looked at the blood on the rocks. She looked at the ledger, the map, the dynamite order. If we split up, she said, her voice dropping, shaking. We are dead. Rourke will hunt us down. We will both fail. Tahan said nothing, but the muscle in his jaw flexed. She was right. Eliza's mind was racing, catching on the man's words. Forced labor. Quarry. Blasting. The dynamite, she said, looking at Tahan. He moved 10 crates, but Jesse's letter said Rourke had a huge supply. The prisoner, forgotten, whimpered. The main supply it is at the quarry. In the magazine, Rourke would not move it all at once. Eliza looked at Tahan. The same thought sparked in their eyes at the same instant. We go west, Tahan said. We go to the quarry first, Eliza said, her voice regaining its iron. We hit them. We get my brother. We get the other prisoners. And we get the dynamite, Tahan finished. All of it. And we use it, Eliza said. We take it from him, and we use it to stop him. It was an insane plan, a raid on a guarded quarry, followed by a 20-mile race to stop a second explosion. It was impossible. It was the only way. Tahan looked at the body of his friend. He looked at Eliza. He gave a single, sharp nod. To the end. They could not leave Nokoni to the buzzards. They carried him, Tahan taking the shoulders, Eliza the feet, to a high, quiet place beneath a scrub cedar. They covered him with a cairn of red stones. It was a fast, poor burial, but it was all they had. Tahan said a few words in his language, a low, soft chant that the wind stole. He took the single, perfect eagle feather from his friend's hair. He held it, his face a mask of grief. Eliza, her eyes blurred, thought of the feather Tahan had given her, the one safe in her bag. Let him ride with us, she whispered, her voice thick. Let him see the end. Tahan looked at her, his dark eyes seeing deep into her. He understood. He held out the feather. With shaking hands, Eliza took a leather thong from her saddle. She tied Nokoni's feather to the dark wood stock of her rifle. It hung there, a small, brave flag of memory. They tied the prisoner, leaving him for Rourke to find. They took his weapons and his horse. They had to ride. The sun was setting, a fiery smear. The quarry was west. They had less than 48 hours. We cannot take the road, Tahan said. We cross the salt flat. It is faster. The flat was a ghostly white expanse in the twilight, a dried inland sea, but the recent flood had left a skin of water over the salt, and the night's sudden, plunging temperature was turning it to ice. The horses shied, snorting, refusing to step onto the cracking, groaning surface. We walk, Tahan said. Lead them. If the ice breaks, pull back. Move slow. They stepped onto the white plain. It was like walking on a broken mirror. The ice groaned, splitting into long, dark fissures under their boots. The air was so cold it burned to breathe. They were tiny, dark figures in a vast, empty world of white and black. I cannot see, Eliza said, pulling her collar tight. There are no landmarks. Which way? Tahan stopped. He pointed up, to the one star that did not move. Then he pointed down. There, he said. Eliza looked. In the starlight, she could just see it. A long, thin, perfectly straight crack in the ice, running from one horizon to the other. "The wind," Tahan said. "It comes from the north. It freezes the water in a line. The North Star crack. It is the land's compass. We follow it." He took the rein of his horse. Eliza took hers, the rifle with Nokoni's feather balanced in her arm. They walked, following the single, faint line in the ice, a dark thread of hope across the frozen, empty dark. The night on the salt flat was a frozen hell. They walked for hours, leading the horses, the ice cracking and groaning under their boots. The world was reduced to the sharp, burning cold, the ghostly white of the ground, and the faint, dark line of Tahan's compass crack in the ice. Eliza had long since lost feeling in her feet. She just focused on the rump of Tahan's horse in front of her, and the rifle with Nokoni's feather, which she had strapped to her own saddle. When they finally stepped onto solid, frozen earth, she nearly collapsed with relief. The horses were trembling, their coats frosted with ice. They were in a landscape of broken hills, sharp and black against the pre-dawn sky. Tahan pointed. "There, the quarry." It was a scar, a great gaping wound in the earth, a man-made canyon lit by the harsh, white glare of acetylene searchlights. The rhythmic clank of hammers and the distant rumble of ore carts echoed even at this hour. They were working the men day and night. The quarry was surrounded by a high fence of timber and barbed wire, and a heavy wooden gate blocked the main entrance. They left the horses in a deep gully, their breath pluming in the frigid air. "Rourke keeps the main dynamite supply there," Eliza whispered, her teeth chattering so hard she could barely speak. She pointed to a small, squat building with a heavy, padlocked door, set apart from the other buildings. "The magazine." "Good," Tahan said. His voice was flat, empty of all warmth. "He has built his own trap." He uncoiled his lariat and was gone, a shadow melting into the deeper shadows at the base of the fence. Eliza held her breath. She watched him scale the timber fence, silent as smoke, avoiding the wire. He dropped inside, disappeared for 2 minutes, and then reappeared. Climbing back over, he returned to her side. In his hand, he carried 3 sticks of dynamite, their fuses and caps intact. "The gate," he said, his voice low. "It is thick, but it will break." He worked with a cold, focused efficiency, binding the sticks together, setting the caps in a short, 6-inch fuse. He looked at Eliza. "The lights, the guards. When the gate breaks, they will look at the gate. You will give them something else to look at. Ride hard, ride fast. Draw the lights away from the barracks." He pointed to a long, low sod building where the prisoners were kept. "And you?" she asked. "I will open the cage," Tahan said. He slipped away again, a ghost in the gray gloom, toward the gate. Eliza ran back to the horses, her heart a cold, heavy stone in her chest. She checked her rifle. She swung into the saddle. She waited. The explosion was not as loud as she expected. It was a deep, dull crump, a sound that felt like a punch in the gut, but its effect was total. The heavy wooden gate tore apart, splintering into 1,000 pieces. Shouts erupted from the camp. A bell began to clang. The searchlights, which had been sweeping the quarry pits, swung wildly and focused on the smoking ruins of the entrance. "Now, girl," Eliza whispered to her mare. She kicked her heels, and the horse, trained for a fast start, leaped from the gully. She charged into the compound, a lone rider, silhouetted against the dark. She fired her rifle into the air, the crack sharp and loud, the feather on her stock a fleeting whip in the gloom. "Over here!" she screamed, her voice high and clear. The gamble worked. A searchlight beam swung from the gate, caught her, and blinded her in its white, terrifying glare. "It is the Commanche," a man shouted. "Get her!" Eliza wheeled her mare, the horse dancing on the loose rock, and galloped along the outside of the fence line, drawing the light and the fire with her. Bullets snapped past, whining in the dark. She was a fast, fleeting target, weaving through the rocks, a phantom rider drawing the eye. She had given him his moment. Tahan used the chaos. He sprinted from the shadows, not for the magazine, but for the barracks. The guards there were running toward the gate. Tahan reached the door. It was a heavy plank affair, barred from the outside by a thick 2x4. He wrenched it free. He kicked the door open. "You are free!" he yelled into the darkness. "Run! The gate is open!" He stepped back as men, specters in rags, stumbled out, blinking in the sudden light, their faces gaunt with hunger and disuse. They saw the broken gate. They heard the shouting, and they began to run, a sudden, desperate flood of humanity. Eliza saw them. She wheeled her horse and rode back toward the gate. The guards were trapped, confused, caught between the escaping prisoners and the phantom shooter in the dark. Tahan was scanning the faces of the escaping men. He grabbed one. "A surveyor. Hart. Where is he?" "In the hole," the man croaked, pointing back. "He fought back yesterday. They threw him in the hole." Tahan ran back inside, to a dark corner of the barracks. A trapdoor. He tore it open. "Hart!" he yelled. A figure stirred in the darkness below. Eliza rode up as Tahan pulled a man from the hole. He was thin, covered in filth, his hair matted, his clothes in tatters. But he looked up, and his eyes, even in the chaos, were the ones she knew better than her own. "Eliza," Jessie's voice was a cracked whisper. "Jessie," she cried, leaping from the saddle. She grabbed him, holding him, her heart breaking at how thin he was, how light. He was shaking, but he was alive. "Eliza," he gasped, his arms closing around her with surprising strength. "You came." "I always come," she whispered, her voice thick. "Eliza," Tahan's voice cut through the moment, sharp as glass. "We do not have time." Jessie seemed to wake. He grabbed her arm. "The magazine. They are moving the rest of the dynamite. To the canyon. Sunrise tomorrow. Less than 24 hours. He shoved his hand inside his torn shirt and pulled out a packet of folded papers, wrapped in oilcloth. "The contract," he panted. "Hale, Weller, Rourke. It is all there. Their signatures. The real blast schedule. I copied it. I had to show someone." "We have to go," Tahan said, pulling a guard from his horse and shoving Jessie toward it. They ran, the three of them, for the dynamite magazine. The prisoners were scattering, drawing most of the guards away. "Jessie," Eliza said, running beside him. "Your letter, you said you joined them." Jessie looked away, his face contorted with a shame that was visible even in the dim light. "I did, Liza, at first." Eliza stopped, her heart turning to ice. "You what?" "I believed him," Jessie said, his voice cracking. "Hale, the man in the suit he came through. He talked about progress, a new city, jobs. He said the railroad would make this land rich. I thought it was good. I mapped the first 10 miles for them. I believed the lies." Eliza felt a sting sharper than any betrayal. "You helped them after what they are." "I did not know," he insisted, grabbing her arm. "I did not know about the dam, about stealing the water. I thought it was just a railroad. When I found the real blueprints, the ones for the dam, when I saw they were going to monopolize the water and break the Commanche, I tried to leave. I tried to take the proof. That is when they grabbed me. That is when they threw me in with the others." Eliza looked at her brother's desperate, hollowed eyes. He had been a fool, a blind, idealistic fool, but he was her brother, and he had tried to make it right. She understood. She did not forgive him. Not yet, but she understood. "We make it right now," she said, her voice hard. They reached the magazine. A single, burly foreman stood at the door, a ring of keys in one hand, a revolver in the other. Tahan moved like a snake. He hit the man's arm, sending the revolver spinning. Before the man could shout, Tahan's knife was at his throat. Nokone's feather, on Eliza's rifle, brushed Tahan's arm as she came up beside him. The keys, Tahan growled. The man, his eyes wide with terror, dropped them. Tahan had the man's arm twisted, his face a mask of cold grief. He was remembering Nokoni. He was remembering the bridge. His knife hand tensed. "Wait," the foreman shrieked. Do not kill me. I know what you want, the dynamite. You cannot get it to Murakay in time, not by the road. Rourke has men on the road." "What do you know?" Eliza snapped. "A shortcut," the man gasped. "An old mine, a tunnel. It cuts through the ridge. It comes out in Red Valley, 5 miles from the canyon. It will cut half the time I have the map. In my office. Let me live, and I will give you the map." Tahan hesitated. His entire being screamed for vengeance, for Nokoni, for the people. But the mission, the time he saw Eliza's eyes on him. He saw the clock ticking down to sunrise. He lowered the knife, his face rigid. He reversed it, striking the man on the temple with the heavy antler hilt. The foreman crumpled, unconscious. "Jesse," Tahan ordered. "Find the map. His office, now!" Jesse ran into the small shack. He came out a moment later, holding a rolled drawing. "This is it, the Hoot Owl's path." "Load the horses," Tahan said to Eliza. Unlocking the magazine, it was full, crate after crate. "We take all we can carry." They loaded Jesse's horse, their own 2 mares, and a 4th horse they had caught. They packed the dynamite carefully, balancing the load. The camp was in chaos. The prisoners gone, the guards in disarray. They rode from the quarry, not south to the road, but north toward a dark, narrow slit in the high stone cliffs. They reached the mouth of the tunnel. It was black. A cold, dead air seemed to flow from it, smelling of minerals and decay. The horses shied, snorting, refusing to enter. "The Hoot Owl's path," Jesse said, his voice low. "My grandfather warned of this place," Tahan said, his voice quiet. "He called it the canyon where the earth sings. He said the spirits of the rock live here." He dismounted. The other 2 watched. From a small pouch at his belt, he took a pinch of something, red ochre, a fine, sacred dust. He scattered it on the ground at the mouth of the cave. His head bowed, his lips moving in a low, soft chant that was older than the railroad, older than the quarry, older than any white man's map. He was asking the earth for safe passage, honoring the spirits he was about to disturb. Eliza watched him. She thought of the handprints in the cave during the flash flood. She thought of the eagle feather. This was his world, his belief, and he was sharing it with her, protecting her with it. When he finished, he did not look at her for approval. But Eliza, her heart full, bowed her head. It was a simple, silent gesture. "I respect this. I respect you." Tahan saw it. He looked at her, and in his eyes, she saw the man from the fire, the man who had promised to speak of a home. He nodded once. "Stay close," Tahan said. "Jesse, you have the map. Lead. Eliza, you and I will guard the powder." Jesse lit a lantern, and they rode, one by one, into the suffocating, absolute darkness of the earth, racing against the sun. They rode out of the Hoot Owl's path as the sky turned from black to a deep, bruised purple. The air was thin and cold, carrying the first clean light of dawn. They were in Red Valley, just as the foreman had promised. Below them, in a wide, shallow bowl, lay Murakay. It was beautiful, even in the cold, hard light. It was a place of life. A thick stand of cottonwood trees, gray and skeletal, traced the path of the stream, and rising from the center, a great solitary spire of red rock, was the Tangdatu, the ancestor rock. It looked like a hand reaching for the sky, but the piece was a lie. The canyon was full of men. Tahan let out a low, soft sound, a hiss of pain and fury. Caleb Rourke was there, standing near the base of the rock, shouting orders. His men, the railroad crew, were swarming. They were drilling, setting the last of the charges. Wires, like black spider webs, ran from the rock to a wooden detonator box on a small rise. As they watched, another group of riders approached from the east. At their lead, his badge winking in the new sunlight, was Deputy Weller. He was not alone. He had a posse of 12 men, ranchers and townsmen Eliza recognized from the trading post. They rode in, their faces grim, their rifles ready. "They are just in time," Jesse whispered, his voice shaking with a mixture of rage and cold. "Weller is bringing the law to protect Rourke's men while they light the fuse." Rourke walked over, greeting Weller with a confident slap on the back. "Right on time. Deputy, we were just about to clear these rocks. Had some trouble with those renegades you warned us about. We are here to see the company's work is not disturbed," Weller announced loudly, for his men to hear. "This is a lawful, private enterprise, protected by the county." The townspeople looked uneasy. They were here because the law had called them, but their eyes kept going to the massive rock, to the crates of dynamite. "We have to stop them," Eliza said, her hand tight on her rifle. "We cannot shoot the town," Tahan said, his voice a low growl. "They are blind, but they are not Rourke." "No," Eliza said, her mind racing. She looked at the ledger, still tied to her saddle. She looked at the oilcloth packet Jesse clutched. "We do not shoot them. We show them. They are here for the law. Let us give it to them." She nudged her mare, and the horse, exhausted, stepped into the open. Jesse moved to one side of her, Tahan to the other. The three of them, covered in grime, ice, and exhaustion, rode slowly down into the bowl. A man shouted, "There it is them, the Commanche!" Deputy Weller wheeled his horse, his face a mixture of shock and anger. "You are under arrest, you three, for the attack on the quarry. For murder." The posse raised their rifles, a line of steel in the morning sun. "Wait!" Eliza's voice was not a shout, but it was clear, and it cut through the cold air. "Who did we murder?" "Deputy the guards Rourke hired to keep men as slaves, or the men at the bridge he sent to kill us." "Lies," Weller bellowed, his face turning purple. "They are trying to stop progress. They are renegades." "We are not stopping progress," Jesse shouted, his voice cracking but strong. He spurred his horse forward a few steps. "We are stopping a crime. I am Jesse Hart. I was chief surveyor for the Red Mesa." The townspeople murmured. They knew Jesse's name. "He is a liar," Weller shouted. "He is wanted for sabotage." "Then what is this?" Jesse yelled. He threw the oilcloth packet. It landed in the dust at the feet of a tall, gray-bearded rancher. "Read it. It is the real contract signed by Baron Hale, by Caleb Rourke, and by him by Deputy Weller." The rancher dismounted, picked up the packet. He unfolded the papers. Eliza pulled the heavy ledger from her saddlebag. "And what is this? This is Rourke's own pay ledger stolen from his tent. You want to know what progress costs?" She opened the book, her voice ringing with cold fury. "To Deputy Weller, for services rendered, $500. A collective gasp went up from the posse. Weller's face went from purple to a sick, pasty white. The rancher looked up from the contract. His voice was a low rumble of disbelief. "It is a dam. He is not just building a railroad. He is damming the Murakay. He is claiming sole water rights to the entire basin." The world went silent. The posse members looked at each other. They looked at the river, their river. They looked at Weller. "You sold our water," the rancher said, his voice flat. "He is a paid man." "Boys!" another rancher yelled. "He sold us all." Two of the posse members slowly, deliberately, turned their horses and their rifles to face Weller. Rourke, who had been watching all this with a bored, cruel smile, merely laughed. He did not care about the posse. He did not care about the law. He held up a lit cigar. "You are all fools," he snarled. "You can have your water when you buy it from me. Now get out of the way." He walked to the first fuse, the one near the stream bed. "No!" Jesse screamed. Rourke's own men, the ones loyal to his pay, not the posse, raised their rifles and fired. The canyon exploded into chaos. The posse scattered, men diving for cover behind rocks, their allegiance instantly broken. The ranchers who had turned on Weller now fired back, not at the posse, but at Rourke's crew. It was a swirling, desperate melee. "The fuses!" Eliza yelled. "There are two—" Rourke had lit the first one. It was sputtering, burning fast. He was now scrambling up the rock, toward the second fuse, the one that would bring the ancestor rock down. "I will take the low fuse," Tahan shouted. He was off his horse, running, not into the gunfire, but straight at the cliff face. He moved like a mountain cat, leaping from boulder to boulder, finding holds Eliza could not even see. The rock was slick with morning mist from the stream. A bullet sparked off the stone by his head. He did not flinch. He reached the wet ledge, slid, caught himself, and grabbed the burning fuse. He ripped it from the blasting cap and threw the sizzling, sparking thing into the water, where it died with a hiss. One fuse was dead. Eliza and Jesse were firing from behind their horses, providing cover. The feather on Eliza's rifle a flash of brown and white. Tahan looked up, toward Rourke. Rourke had reached the top. He saw Tahan. He saw Eliza. He smiled. He did not go for the fuse. He moved fast, coming up behind Eliza, who was reloading, her eyes on Tahan. A heavy arm, like a steel trap, clamped around her throat. The cold, round muzzle of a revolver pressed hard against her temple. "Drop your guns," Rourke bellowed, his voice echoing in the canyon. He dragged Eliza backward, holding her tight against his chest. A human shield. "All of you, or I will paint this rock with her brains." The shooting stopped. The echoes died, leaving a terrible, ringing silence. Jesse froze, his rifle half raised. The townspeople froze. Tahan, on the ledge below, looked up. His face, when he saw her, was something Eliza would never forget. It was a mask of pure, blank horror, a grief so profound it was physical. He slowly, almost unconsciously, raised his own rifle. Go ahead, Commanche," Rourke taunted, laughing. "Try it. You know the rules. Don't you? You cannot shoot. Not when I have the girl. You all know what happens to the girl." Tahan's hand was shaking. His finger was white on the trigger. He was looking at Eliza. "Tahan," she whispered, her voice choked. "No, do not." He saw her face. He saw her choice. He understood. His body, which had been coiled tight as a spring, deflated. He could not, he would not risk her life. Not for the rock, not for the water, not for revenge. "I am here," Tahan called out, his voice strong, clear. "A surrender. Let her go. You want me, the one who ruined your camp, the one who took your book. I am here." He lowered his rifle. He opened his hands, showing them empty. He let the rifle slide from the wet rock. It clattered down the stones, landing in the stream. He stood, exposed, his arms out. "Let her go." Rourke laughed, a dry, triumphant hack. "You are a fool, the biggest fool I ever met." He shoved Eliza hard. She stumbled, falling to her knees, but he kept the gun on her. "I think I will kill her first," Rourke said, savoring the moment. "To teach you a lesson. Then I will kill you. Then I will light this fuse, and I will get paid." He leveled the revolver, not at Tahan, but at Eliza's chest. She saw the hammer pull back. She tensed, bracing for the end. The shot was deafening. Eliza was thrown backward, as if kicked by a mule. The force was stunning, driving the air from her lungs. She hit the ground, gasping. "Eliza!" Tahan's scream was a raw wound. Rourke stared. He had hit her center mass. She should be dead. Eliza gasped for air. She looked down. Her coat was torn, smoking, but beneath it, she felt a deep, agonizing bruise, a broken rib, but no blood. The ledger, the thick gray leather-bound book, Rourke's own ledger of crimes, was stuffed deep inside the front of her coat. The bullet had struck it dead center. The book, her thin armor, had saved her life. Rourke was gaping, his mind unable to process what he was seeing. That moment was all she had. Fueled by a white-hot surge of adrenaline and pain, Eliza lunged. She did not grab for his gun. She slammed her shoulder, her whole body, into his waist. Rourke was standing on the very edge of the cliff, right next to the final fuse. He was perfectly off balance. He teetered, his arms windmilling, his eyes wide with shock. He grabbed for her, his fingers catching her coat. He went over the edge. He did not pull her with him. Tahan was already moving, scrambling up the last few feet of rock. He grabbed Eliza's arm, anchoring her, pulling her back from the brink just as Rourke's grip was torn free. Rourke fell, but he did not fall far. His flailing hand caught something. He was hanging, swinging in the open air, 50 feet above the canyon floor. He was hanging by the thin, black fuse wire, the very one he had set. Tahan and Jesse were at her side. Tahan pulled Eliza into his arms, his hand on her back, feeling the solid, living warmth of her. His face buried in her hair, his whole body shaking. She was alive. She was hurt, but she was alive. Below them, Rourke's voice was a thin, terrified shriek. "Help me, please, the wire. It is slipping. Do not let me fall. Help me." Tahan pulled back from Eliza. He looked down at the man dangling. His face was granite. This was the man who had murdered Nokoni. This was the man who had just tried to murder Eliza. This was the man who would have destroyed his home. He could just stand there. He could just watch. Justice. Eliza, on her hands and knees, looked at Tahan. She saw the war in his eyes. "Tahan," she panted, her chest a wildfire of pain. "No, not your way, not like this." She reached for the lariat still on her mare's saddle. She pulled it free. She held it out to him. Tahan looked at the rope. He looked at her. He looked at the terrified, pleading face of the man below. He understood. Letting Rourke fall was vengeance. Hauling him up was justice. He took the rope. He looked at Jesse and at the gray-bearded rancher who had run up to help. They secured the lariat. Tahan, his face grim, lowered the loop. "Take it, Rourke," he said, his voice flat. "You will not die here. You will face the law." Rourke, weeping, sobbing, grabbed the loop and slipped it under his arms. Tahan, Jesse, and the rancher began to pull, hand over hand, hauling the heavy, struggling man up the cliff face. They dragged him over the edge, a gasping, ruined heap. Weller, seeing his boss captured, his power gone, threw his own gun down and put his hands in the air. A sharp, sizzling sound. "The fuse!" Jesse screamed. In the chaos, the fuse wire Rourke had been hanging from had been jostled. The lit cigar he had dropped was lying right beside it. The fuse was lit. It was sputtering, a small, fast snake of fire, burning toward the hole packed with 20 sticks of dynamite. There was no time to pull it, no time to douse it. Jesse did not hesitate. He did not think. He leaped forward, landing on the rock next to the hissing fuse. He pulled the antler-handled knife from his boot. With a single, desperate downward slash, he cut the burning wire, just an inch from where it entered the drill hole. The burning end fell, tumbling down the rock face. It hit the stream below with a faint hiss. It was over. Silence. A profound, absolute quiet settled over the canyon. The only sound was the wind, moving through the cottonwoods, and the soft, clear, unbroken song of the stream as it ran through the Murakay. The rock was safe. The water was free. The silence that fell over Murakay was deeper than the canyon. The echo of the last gunshot faded, leaving only the sound of the stream, a soft, steady singing that had been absent for days. It was the sound of life returning. Jesse was on his knees, His hands braced on the red rock, breathing hard, the cut fuse wire at his feet. Tahan stood over Eliza, his hand on her shoulder, his whole body a shield, as if expecting another attack. Eliza herself was pushing to her feet, her ribs a single, large, agonizing bruise, the ruined ledger still inside her coat. The fight was gone. The ranchers, the townsmen, stood in a loose, confused circle, their rifles lowered. They looked at the bound, weeping form of Caleb Rourke. They looked at the ashen-faced Deputy Weller, who had dropped his gun, and they looked at the three people on the cliff. The gray-bearded rancher, Anderson, was the first to move. He walked forward, his rifle held in the crook of his arm, and picked up the oilcloth packet Jesse had thrown. He read it again, slowly, then looked up, his eyes hard as flint. "Weller," he said, his voice a low rumble, "you are a disgrace to that badge." Weller started to bluster, to find an excuse, but the cold eyes of a dozen men stopped him. "You sold our water," another rancher said, spitting. "You sold us." "Bind him," Anderson said. Two men grabbed Weller, pulled his hands behind his back, and tied them tight with a pigging rope. Weller did not resist. He was a broken, hollow man. Rourke, however, was not. As they hauled him to his feet, his fear was replaced by a familiar, bottomless spite. He stared at Tahan, his eyes full of a venom that was pure and terrible.
"This is not over, Commanche!"
Rourke snarled, his voice a rasp. Tahan looked at him, his face carved from stone. He did not honor the words with an answer. He simply turned his back and offered his hand to Eliza, helping her down the last few rocks. The ranchers gathered around Anderson. "We need to make this right," Anderson said. He looked at Eliza and Jesse. "These papers, the ledger, they are the truth," Eliza said, her voice quiet, though it hurt to breathe. She pulled the heavy, warped book from her coat. The cover was split, the bullet still lodged deep inside, a lump of deformed lead. She handed it to Anderson. The rancher looked at the bullet, then at her, his eyes wide. He understood what she had done, what she had risked. He nodded, a gesture of profound respect. "We write it all down," Anderson said, his voice firm, taking charge. "Right now, we will all sign it. A statement. For the federal marshal. We will tell what we saw, what we were tricked into." He opened the ledger. On a blank page at the back, he began to write. His hands sure. He wrote about the fraud, the attempted blasting, the slavery at the quarry, the bravery of Jesse Hart, and the alliance with Tahan, one by one. The townsmen and ranchers stepped up, signing their names to the truth. It was the end of the Red Mesa and Pacific Line in this territory. As they were binding Rourke and Weller to their horses for the long ride to the fort, a rider came hard from the east. He was a telegraph boy. His horse lathered. He skidded to a stop. "Word from the marshal," he yelled. "Baron Hale, he is gone, took a train east out of Dodge City, cleared out his bank accounts. He fled." A ragged cheer went up. The money, the power, the head of the snake was cut. It was truly over. Tahan did not cheer. He walked to the stream, knelt, and splashed the cold, clear water onto his face, washing away the grit and the blood. He stood and looked at Eliza and Jesse. "It is finished here, but it is not finished. You must come." They were exhausted, their bones aching, Eliza's chest afire of pain. But they nodded. They owed him this. They owed it to Noconi. They rode for hours, away from Muracay, into the high folds of the Llano Estacado, to a place hidden from the world. The Commanche camp was not a collection of tents. It was a part of the land itself, sheltered in a wide, wooded canyon. Fires burned. The air smelled of sage and roasting meat. When they rode in, Tahan at their side, a deep silence fell. The people, his people, came out to watch, their faces impassive. their dark eyes missing nothing. Tahan led them to the largest fire, where a circle of old men sat, their faces maps of wisdom and time, the council of elders. Tahan dismounted. He stood before them, and he spoke. He spoke in his own tongue, the words a low, rhythmic story. He spoke of the railroad, the lies, the theft of the water. He spoke of Nokoni, his voice breaking for a single moment, a sharp stone in the smooth flow of his words. He told of the fight, the bridge, the quarry, the blast. Then he turned and put his hand on Jesse's shoulder. He told of the surveyor who had been blind, but who had opened his eyes. He told of the man who cut the fuse. He put his hand on Eliza's arm. He told of the woman who read the tracks, who spoke the Kiowa word, who faced the gunfire, who honored the grave, and who had taken the bullet. He held up the eagle feather she had carried. When he was finished, a long silence held the air. The oldest of the elders, a man with hair as white as winter, looked at Eliza, then at Jesse. He spoke, his voice dry as leaves. Tahan translated, his own voice soft. He says, "The water is the blood of the earth. You have bled for it with us. The new Munu do not forget blood. You are welcome at this fire." They sat. Food was shared. The elders spoke long into the night. It was not just a victory celebration. It was a council of war and of peace. The railroad was a wounded snake, not a dead one. Baron Hale was gone. But the idea of the railroad was not. The elders propose a new thing. Tahan explained, his face serious in the firelight. The white ranchers have signed their paper. We have signed ours. Now, we will take both papers to the federal marshal, not as enemies, but as one voice. We will demand the railroad follow the old government survey, far to the south, away from our lands, away from all our water. The white-haired elder spoke again, his eyes on Tahan, then on Eliza. And, Tahan said, a new note in his voice, they will propose a treaty, a water treaty, not with the white government, a treaty between the people and the ranchers, the townsmen, that Murakay will be protected, that the water will be shared, but never owned, never damned. It will be law for us all. It was a new beginning, a fragile one, but it was real. Days later, back at the Half Moon Station, the world felt different. Mrs. Bell, her face pale, her voice quiet, could not do enough for them. She fussed over Eliza, tending her bruised ribs, offering food and a soft bed. She was ashamed, and her shame made her kind. Eliza found Jesse by the corral, checking his mare. The silence between them was old, familiar, the silence of family. "I was a fool, Liza," Jesse said, not looking at her, his hands running over the horse's leg. "I believed all those words about progress. I wanted to build something." "You did," Eliza said, leaning against the warm wood of the corral. "You built a future, Jesse. You just had to tear the old one down first." He finally looked at her, his eyes clear for the first time in a year. "I thought I lost you, at the canyon." "I am hard to lose," she said. She put her hand on his. "You cut the fuse, Jesse. That is all that matters." He nodded, his throat tight. He looked around the dusty, wind-scoured station. "This place, it is a good place, but it needs life. It needs clean water. I am a surveyor. I know this land now. I know where the water hides. I am going to stay. I am going to build a new well, a real one, a clean water station, for everyone, for the ranchers, for the stage line, and for Tahan's people, if they will come." Eliza looked at her brother. The foolish, idealistic boy was gone. In his place was a man, one who understood that progress was not about iron, it was about water. She smiled, a real smile, and the pain in her ribs felt a little less. "I think they will," she said. The next day, the three of them, Tahan, Eliza, and Jesse, rode back to the red muddy river. The cairn of red stones was just as they had left it, a lonely monument under the vast blue sky. Tahan built a small, clean fire of sage and sweetgrass. He let the smoke wash over his hands, over his face, over the grave. He spoke to Nokoni in his own language. It was a low, soft conversation, a sending off, a report of a mission finished. He was telling his friend that the water was safe, that his sacrifice had meant everything. Eliza watched, her heart full. When he was finished, she stepped forward. She thought about what she had to give. She had no songs, no sacred smoke. She had only what she was. She unbuckled the reins from her mare's bridle. They were the ones she had braided herself, the ones she held when she first came to this land. The dark, supple leather a symbol of her iron will, her need to control her own fate. She held them for a moment. Then she laid them gently on the red stones. It was a letting go. You do not bind the land. You do not own it. You just live with it. You let it hold you. Tahan watched her. He saw the gesture. He saw the woman. He understood the symbol. He nodded once, a sign of deep, shared understanding. Time passed. The wound in the land began to heal. The quarry was silent. The survey stakes, the red flags of Rourke's ambition, were pulled up, one by one. At the Half Moon Station, something new was happening. Jesse, true to his word, had found the new water, the drilling rig, hired by Anderson and the other ranchers, had struck a sweet, clear spring. And the station became a meeting place. It held a weekly market. The first time it was tense, ranchers on one side of the yard, Commanche families on the other, a wide, silent space of dust between them. But the next week, the space was smaller. Tahan was there, trading horses. Jesse was there, his plans for the new well spread on a table. Eliza watched from the porch. She saw a small Commanche girl, brave, walk into the empty space. She was watching a group of white children, the ranchers' sons and daughters, who were playing a game with a hoop and a stick. The girl stood, watching, curious. One of the white boys, seeing her, tossed the hoop. It rolled, wobbling, and fell at her feet. The girl looked at her mother, who nodded. The girl picked up the hoop. She threw it back. Eliza felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the sun. That evening, the air was cool and sweet, smelling of dusk and cottonwood. She had ridden to Murakay. She needed to see it, to feel the quiet. She sat at the base of the ancestor rock, her hand on the stone. It was warm from the day's sun. The stream sang its endless song. She felt the dull ache in her ribs, a reminder. She heard a footstep in the sand. Tahan sat beside her. They sat in the comfortable silence that was their way, watching the stars begin to prick the deep violet sky. "He is a good man, your brother." Tahan said, "He works hard. The water he found is good." "Yes," Eliza said, "he is." "The council is pleased. The treaty is strong. The new railroad line is far south. The land will be left in peace." "I'm glad," Eliza said. He was quiet for a long time. She could feel the warmth of him, sitting so close. "I spoke to the elders," he said, his voice low, pitched for her ears only, just as it had been in the boneyard. Eliza turned her head, looking at his strong, clear profile against the twilight. "I told them what I promised." He said, "I spoke of the fire. I spoke of the shelter in the storm. I spoke of a home." Eliza looked at the water, then at the man beside her. The wind moved through the canyon, a soft, gentle breath. She did not feel the cold. She felt the solid strength of the rock at her back and the man at her side. She had come to this land looking for one lost thing, and she had found everything. She said nothing. She just leaned, slowly, and rested her head against his shoulder. It felt strong. It felt right. It felt like home. The ride back from Murakay was quiet. The silence of the canyon followed them, a deep, breathing peace that Eliza had never known. The world was the same. The wind still blew. The grass was still pale. The sky was still an aching, empty blue. But she was different. This land was no longer a place she was passing through, a hostile world to be crossed. It was a place she had fought for, a place she had bled for. Weeks passed. The raw, harsh edges of the high plains began to soften. Autumn gave way to a mild winter, then yielded to a wet, vibrant spring. The land, soaked by the storms that had nearly killed them, came alive. At the Half Moon Station, now renamed the Murakay Station, the change was real. Jesse's well was finished. The water that came up was cold and sweet, the best water in 50 miles. The stage line, its route now permanently fixed far to the south, stopped less often. But drovers, ranchers, and families in canvas-topped wagons began to make the station a planned stop. They came for Jesse's clean water, and they came for Eliza's work. She had taken over the old, leaning barn. She had rebuilt it with Jesse's help. It was now a saddlery and horse station. The smell of new leather, oil, and wood filled the air. Her braided reins, her repaired saddles, her skill with horses became known. She was not a traveler. She was not a visitor. She was Eliza Hart, of Murakay Station. She had come looking for her brother, and she had found her life. The law, the real law, was slow, but it was thorough. One day in late spring, a new federal marshal rode in. He was a tall, quiet man who did not wear his badge for show. He had come from the state capital. He watered his horse at Jesse's well, and he drank the water himself, slowly, thoughtfully. He had news. He carried the signed affidavit from Anderson and the other ranchers. He carried the ruined ledger that had saved Eliza's life. Caleb Rourke had faced a state judge. The charges were numerous: conspiracy, kidnapping, attempted murder, interfering with federal contracts. The testimony of the ranchers, combined with the power of Rourke's own ledger, had been absolute. He would not see the sun as a free man again. Deputy Weller had confessed. He had detailed the entire scheme, the bribes, the forgeries, the blind eye he had turned. His confession, hoping for mercy, had earned him 10 years in a federal prison. And Baron Hale, the man of money, the man in the East, was finished. His flight had been an admission of guilt. The federal investigation into his banking practices had uncovered a web of fraud. The Red Mesa and Pacific Railroad was bankrupt, its charter revoked, its name a curse. The justice was real. It was slow, but it was solid. It was sustainable. That season, Eliza and Tahan rode to Murakay often. The stream, full and strong, ran clear. The ancestor rock stood as it had for 1,000 years. And at its base, in the damp, rich earth, a carpet of small, blue and yellow wildflowers had bloomed. A sudden, bright promise. Jesse was there. He had brought a wide, smooth plank of cottonwood. He had pounded it into the ground near the head of the spring. He had carved letters into it, deep and clear. Murakay Spring, all are welcome. Water is life. Do not harm the land. Tahan dismounted and stood before the sign for a long time. He read the words, his finger tracing the carved letters. Then, he did not speak. He drew his own knife. Beside Jesse's carved words, Tahan began to carve. He did not make letters. He carved the symbols of his people. He carved the sign for water, the sign for the people, the handprint of the ancestors, the story of the sacred place. When he was finished, the two languages sat side by side on the same piece of wood. A single message for a shared world. That sign was the beginning. The market at the station grew. The fear that had once separated the ranchers from the Commanche began to fade, replaced by a cautious, necessary respect. The curiosity of the children had been the first bridge. The school was the second. It was not a building. It was a place, under the deep shade of the largest cottonwood tree by the stream. Jesse was there. He had a slate and a piece of chalk. He was teaching Anderson's son and a small, quiet Commanche girl how to make the letter A. The two children sat shoulder to shoulder, their heads bent in shared concentration. Tahan was there. He was not teaching with a book. He had a handful of mud, and he was showing a rancher's daughter how to read the track of a fox, how it was different from a small dog, how it walked in a straight, careful line. Eliza was there. She had brought a gentle, old pony. She was showing a Commanche boy how to hold his hand flat to offer a treat, how to check a hoof for a stone. She was teaching them the language of the horse. The three of them, a surveyor, a scout, and a horsewoman. They were the teachers, and the children were the future. One evening, Eliza was working late in the saddlery. The air was cool, smelling of cured leather and the sagebrush on the wind. She was braiding a new set of reins, her hands moving in the familiar, complex pattern. The work was a meditation. It was her strength. Tahan entered. He did not knock. He never did. He just appeared in the doorway, a shadow against the deep blue of the twilight. He stood for a moment, watching her. He watched her hands, calloused and strong, weaving the leather. He stepped inside. He did not speak. He held out his closed fist. Eliza's hand stopped. She looked at him, her heart suddenly quiet. He opened his hand. On his palm lay a small, simple ring. It was not silver. It was not gold. It was braided, a circle of dark hair and light hair, woven together. He spoke, his voice low. For her alone, he said it was horsehair, from his dark gelding and from her buckskin mare. He said it was the custom of his people, a circle that does not break, a promise. It was the sign for a home, for two paths that become one. He held it out. His eyes asked the question. Eliza looked at the simple, powerful thing. She looked at his face, the face she had seen in the storm, in the firelight, in the chaos of the battle. She thought of the ice and the cold and the shared warmth of the buffalo robe. She lifted her left hand, the one stained with leather dye. Tahan took her hand. His fingers were warm and strong. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. She whispered the word, "Yes." He nodded, a slow, deep understanding. He said the elders would witness, and her brother. She said yes, a feast by the stream for both their families. The seasons turned again. The wind grew cold. A high, thin sound against the walls of the new cabin. It was a small, solid house, built of timber and sod, set on a rise between the station and the mouth of the canyon. Jesse had helped, and Anderson had brought the wood. It was built to last. Inside, a fire burned bright in the stone hearth. The stones were from Murakee. Eliza was tired, a deep, good exhaustion from a long day. She sat on the floor, her back resting against Tahan. He was solid, a warm rock. He reached for the heavy, familiar buffalo robe, the one from the boneyard. He draped it over her shoulders, pulling her closer, enveloping them both in its shared warmth. She breathed in the smell of wood smoke and cured hide, and him. It was the smell of safety. It was the smell of her life. She looked at the firelight as it caught the braided ring on her finger. She felt the solid walls of her home and the solid, living man at her side. She whispered the words, a quiet, final promise for the cold night. They had chosen each other, and they had chosen this land. Thank you for listening to this story. Please comment below where you are listening from so we can all connect and share our thoughts. And remember to subscribe to my channel Wild West Tales, like the video, and support further by pressing the hype button so this story in the video can be heard by more people.